Kansas City, Missouri, July 25th, 1989. Somewhere across the Atlantic, the Berlin Wall was beginning to crack. History was being made. The world was holding its breath over something enormous. But in a modest two-story house on Van Brunt Boulevard, a 16-year-old girl named Fawn Marie Cox was doing something far more ordinary. She was tucking away her tips from a long shift at the amusement park, counting every single dollar. Dreaming about buying her first car before senior year. Independence. Freedom. A future she could almost taste. She had no idea she had less than 12 hours to live. The person who would take everything from her was not a stranger lurking somewhere out there in the dark. He was someone who knew the exact layout of her home, someone who knew which windows stayed unlocked, someone who had sat at her family's dinner table, eaten their food, laughed at their jokes, and smiled right at them. For 31 years, he would get away with it. And here is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. He did not hide. He did not run. He came to her funeral. He stood beside her grieving family. He looked them in the eyes and never said a single word. This is the story of Fawn Marie Cox. You are watching Crime Files America, and I need you to stay with me all the way to the end because the truth that science finally uncovered 31 years later is going to shake something deep inside of you. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are watching this from. Tell me what time it is over there as you are watching. I want to see how far this story reaches. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are not subscribed yet, we will get to that very soon. Now, before we talk about what happened that night, you need to know who Fawn was, because she deserves to be remembered as a full human being, not just a cold case number. Fawn lived on East 9th Street on Van Brunt Boulevard with her parents, John and Beverly Cox, and her two younger sisters, Amber and Felisa. She was the eldest daughter, the responsible one, the girl who helped raise her siblings without being asked, who worked long summer shifts without complaint, who roller skated with her sisters on weekends and never missed church on Sundays. Her best friend, Donna McGee, lived right across the street. Together, they spent summer evenings talking about boys, about high school drama, about everything and nothing the way only teenage girls can. That summer of '89, Fawn worked at Worlds of Fun amusement park, standing behind a cash register, handing over ticket stubs, smiling at strangers who had no idea they were looking at a girl with a very specific dream. Every dollar she earned went into a carefully growing pile with one purpose and one purpose only: her own car, her own freedom, her own future. She was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a 16-year-old girl doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, building something small and entirely her own. And someone she trusted decided to destroy all of it. Now, right here, before this story goes any further, I need to ask you something honest. If you knew that subscribing to this channel was the one small thing that made sure stories like Fawn's kept reaching people who needed to hear them, would you do it? Because that is exactly what happens every time someone hits subscribe. Fawn's story reaches one more person. One more family learns they are not alone. Most people who say they will subscribe later never do. Do not let that be you. Hit the button now, because Fawn deserves more than later. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand the Cox family home. It was an older two-story house with thin walls, old plumbing, and a bathroom that connected two upstairs bedrooms. John and Beverly had converted the downstairs dining room into their bedroom so their daughters could have more space upstairs. Fawn had her own room. Amber and Felisa shared the room across the hall. And the neighborhood sat in the shadow of a local street gang called the 9th Street Dogs, known for burglaries, thefts, and violence. Most families on the block knew them. Most families feared them. But what made the Cox home specifically vulnerable had nothing to do with the neighborhood. It had to do with the windows. Years before the murder, the family had locked themselves out of the house by accident. Amber, fearless as she was, had climbed the side of the house all the way to Fawn's second-floor window and got the family back inside. After that, the rule became simple. Leave the windows unlocked during summer. For ventilation, for emergencies, for the cool breeze that made the heat upstairs bearable. It was practical, it was innocent, and it was an open invitation to anyone who knew the house well enough. There was one more detail. Parked directly beneath the girls, upstairs window sat John Cox's work vehicle, a bright orange dumpster truck. It had been parked in that exact spot for so long that nobody thought about it anymore. Just part of the landscape, just scenery. But that orange truck was about to become a ladder for a killer. Around 11 o'clock that night, Beverly and Felisa drove to Worlds of Fun to pick Fawn up from her shift. She slid into the back seat exhausted, her feet aching from hours of standing. All she wanted was her bed. When they got home, the house was sweltering. At the family's only air conditioning unit, a loud ancient machine crammed into the window of the parents' downstairs bedroom, rattled and wheezed all night long, drowning out nearly every other sound in the house. Felisa slept on the couch in her parents' room to escape the heat upstairs, but Fawn valued her privacy more than her comfort. She did not mind the warmth if it meant having her own space. So while her family settled downstairs in the cool air, Fawn climbed the stairs alone. She changed into her nightshirt. Her bedroom door lock had been broken for months, so she wedged a steak knife into the doorframe, a teenager's improvised security system. She set her alarm. She climbed into bed. She closed her eyes. Downstairs, the air conditioner roared. John Cox, a notoriously deep sleeper, was already snoring. Beverly and Felisa drifted off on the couch. Amber was across the street babysitting for a neighbor. The house went quiet, but someone was already inside, hidden in the upstairs hallway, waiting in the darkness, watching Fawn's door. Somewhere between midnight and 2 in the morning, the family's little poodle began to whimper. The dog was pregnant and had always been calm by nature. But suddenly she became frantic, barking with an urgency that somehow cut through the constant rumble of the air conditioner downstairs. Felisa stirred on the couch, groggy and irritated. She got up, went to the dog, whispered softly until it quieted. Now she told herself it was just pregnancy nerves. She went back to bed. That was the only disturbance anyone in the Cox family would ever remember from that entire night. One frightened dog, one sleepy teenager who went back to sleep, but that dog knew. Animals sense danger in ways that we as human beings cannot explain. That little poodle was screaming a warning that nobody in that house understood. And by the time morning came, the chance to act on that warning had long passed. And the air conditioner hummed. The family slept, and upstairs in Fawn's bedroom something unspeakable was happening to a 16-year-old girl who had done nothing wrong. Stories like this one, the ones that keep you up at night, the ones that make you check your locks twice before bed, these are the exact stories that Crime Files America exists to tell. And here is something I want you to sit with for a moment. If you walked away from this channel right now and never came back, then who would tell you the next story? Who would make sure you heard it with the full weight it deserves? If that thought makes you uncomfortable, good. Subscribe. Because the next family deserves the same audience Fawn just got. Around 9 or 10 o'clock, Fawn's alarm clock began to ring. One of those old, relentless alarms, designed to wake even the deepest sleeper. It rang and kept on ringing. Fawn did not turn it off. John Cox, needing the upstairs bathroom, made his way up the stairs. Then he passed Fawn's room. The alarm was blaring. He glanced in. She was lying in bed completely motionless, in an odd position that did not look quite right. He noticed she was not wearing underwear beneath her nightshirt. Concerned, but not fully alarmed, he pulled a blanket over her to preserve her modesty and continued to the bathroom. He thought she was sleeping deeply. Downstairs, Beverly was growing uneasy. The alarm had been ringing far too long. Fawn was not a heavy sleeper. Beverly called up to Felisa. Go check on your sister. Felisa climbed the stairs, irritation mixing with worry. She pushed open the door and told her sister to wake up. Then she saw it. Fawn was lying completely still. Her body had an unnatural rigidity. Her skin had taken on a disturbing shade of blue, and around her neck, wrapped tight, was fabric, twisted into something that no one should ever have to see on someone they love. Felisa screamed. So Beverly Cox ran up those stairs faster than she had ever moved in her life. When she saw her daughter, her mind could not process what her eyes were showing her. She dialed 911, hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone. The ambulance arrived within minutes. It was already too late. Fawn had been dead for hours. Her body was cold and rigid. The paramedics stepped back. This was a crime scene. When Amber came home from babysitting, yes, we're beginning to understand exactly what 10 a.m. We're beginning to understand exactly what had happened to Fawn. What they found would haunt Kansas City for the next 31 years. Fawn had been strangled. The medical examiner confirmed it. She had also been sexually assaulted. This was not random. This was deliberate, calculated, and personal. As a stereo and a Nintendo console sitting in the yard below the second-floor window, investigators found a stereo and a Nintendo console sitting in the grass, as if someone had thrown them out the window, planning to collect them on the way out, and then fled in a sudden panic. The entry point was clear. Someone had climbed the orange dumpster truck, crossed the outbuilding roof, and slipped through the unlocked window. The crime scene technicians collected short hairs that did not belong to Fawn, small blood stains, and critically, traces of semen on her bedsheet. In 1989, that DNA evidence was nearly useless. There were no genetic databases, no markers, just blood type comparisons and educated guesses. They also found a strange item nobody could explain, an old army cap in Fawn's room. No one in the family recognized it. Fawn had never owned anything like it. And there was the steak knife, the one she had wedged into her broken door frame, found at the scene, possibly used to intimidate her into silence. One detail troubled investigators more than anything else. Fawn's bed was on wheels. In a violent struggle, that bed would have rolled across the room unless someone held it steady. Did that mean two attackers? It was a question that would go unanswered for decades. Within weeks, police turned their attention to the 9th Street dogs. And there was also a direct connection through Fawn's boyfriend, who was tied to the gang. After her death, he enlisted in the military and left Kansas City entirely, as if trying to outrun the grief. In August of 1989, 1 month after the murder, police arrested 3 teenagers. One attended Fawn's school at Northeast High. A witness had come forward with detailed information, the kind that had been deliberately kept out of the press. For the first time, the Cox family felt something close to hope. One of the teenagers was charged with first-degree murder and spent 8 months in jail while prosecutors built the case. Then everything collapsed. The DNA did not match. The fingerprints did not match. The witness suddenly recanted, claimed they had lied, and stopped cooperating entirely. Without that testimony, prosecutors had nothing. All 3 suspects were released. But before they walked free, one of them confessed during interrogation. He described climbing the orange truck, crossing the roof, slipping through the unlocked window. He gave details that had never been released to the public, including how a tape recorder's handle snapped off when he threw it out the window. He told investigators exactly where he had hidden it, under a bush near the house. Police searched. They found it exactly where he said. This was not a guess. This was someone who had been inside that house on the night Fawn died. But he withdrew the confession. He stopped talking. The story evaporated. Without his testimony, without DNA linking anyone to the assault, prosecutors had nothing. The case went cold. For the Cox family, this was a specific and sustained torture. They knew those boys had been in the house. Knowing and proving are 2 entirely different things. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years. And whoever had really murdered Fawn Marie Cox kept walking free. Right now, while the weight of what you just heard is still sitting in your chest, I want you to ask yourself something. If this were your family's story and not enough people cared to keep it alive, what would you want strangers to do when they found it? You would want them to stay. You would want them to share it. You would want them to subscribe so that the algorithm kept pushing it to new ears. That is exactly what subscribing to Crime Files America does. It keeps these stories moving. If you leave without subscribing, this story stops with you. And Fawn deserves more than that. The Cox family refused, in the most complete sense of the word, to let Fawn become a forgotten statistic. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, John and Beverly became warriors for their daughter. Fundraisers, billboards across Kansas City, a reward of $3,000 in 2000, then $10,000 in 2019. Beverly gave interview after interview, her voice always steady and always heavy. She told reporters, "Money does a lot on the streets. That is what we are hoping and praying for." Amber became the family's relentless investigator, scouring true crime forums, cold case websites, every mention of Fawn's name anywhere online. When she found discussions about the case, she reached out, thanked people, asked if anyone had real information. Despite all of it, the case stayed frozen. In 1989, DNA technology barely existed as a practical tool. Even in the early 2000s, when databases went online, Fawn's samples were checked against thousands of offenders. No matches. The Cox family watched the Golden State Killer case get cracked by genetic genealogy and asked the same agonizing question over and over. Why not Fawn? The answer was money. Advanced genetic genealogy is expensive. Only a handful of labs worldwide can do it. Police departments have to choose which cases get priority. In 2019, the family stopped waiting. They fundraised $10,000 themselves, walked into the police department with the money, and asked for answers. The police said no. Accepting family money would create a two-tiered justice system where wealth determined whose case got solved first. The family understood the reasoning. Understanding it did not ease a single day of the pain. Felisa said it plainly. And if this had been a rich family or someone important, this case would have been solved immediately. She was right, and everyone in that room knew it. Then the summer of 2020 changed everything. In June of that year, the federal government launched Operation Legend, a national initiative to combat violent crime in American cities, named after 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro, who had been murdered in Kansas City. The operation brought federal funding, FBI resources, in advanced laboratory access, and genetic genealogy testing. Captain Ben Caldwell, recently promoted, saw the opportunity and submitted Fawn's case for the new testing protocol. It was approved. The DNA samples collected in 1989 were sent to Parabon Nanolabs, one of the world's leading genetic genealogy firms. Instead of comparing the DNA only to criminal databases, a genetic genealogy compares it against millions of people who have voluntarily uploaded their DNA to ancestry platforms. Scientists build family trees, identify distant relatives, and narrow the suspect pool down to a single name. It is painstaking work, and it works. For weeks after the samples were sent, the Cox family waited, barely breathing. After 31 years, being asked to wait just a little longer was one of the hardest stretches of all. Then, on November 11th, 2020, on 31 years and 4 months after the night Fawn was murdered in her own bed, the Kansas City Police Department made a phone call to the Cox family. They had identified the killer. Before I tell you that name, I want to say something directly to you. When you hear who this person was, something is going to shift inside of you. And when this video ends and you are sitting with that feeling, I want you to remember where you heard this story. If there is a part of you that does not want to lose access to stories told this way, there is only one thing stopping you from making sure that never happens. Subscribe right now. One click. That is all it takes. Because once this video ends, most people forget. Do not be most people. The name shattered every single thing the Cox family thought they understood about the last 31 years of their lives. Donald Lee Cox, Jr. Not a stranger, not a 9th Street dog, but not some faceless monster from outside. Donald Cox was Fawn's cousin. He was 21 years old when he murdered her, just 5 years her senior. He had been a guest in that house dozens of times. He knew which windows stayed unlocked. He knew every room. He knew the family's schedule well enough to know that Fawn would be alone upstairs that night, and he used every piece of that knowledge to commit the most unforgivable betrayal imaginable. For 31 years, Donald sat at family dinners. He passed the salt at Christmas. He looked John and Beverly Cox in the eye at Thanksgiving. He attended Fawn's funeral. He stood beside the family whose daughter he had murdered, and he never said a word. 31 years of silence. According to Amber, there had always been something unsettling and dark about Donald. She later revealed that he had abused younger girls in the extended family, secrets buried in shame and fear for years that nobody had ever been able to bring into the light. But nobody had imagined he was capable of murder. The family would never get to face him in a courtroom, because Donald Lee Cox, Jr. had died in 2006, 14 years before science caught up to him. He had overdosed on drugs. His death was investigated due to suspicious circumstances, and during the autopsy, investigators had preserved a blood sample as standard procedure. But because Donald was the victim in that particular case, his DNA was never entered into any criminal database. It just sat in storage, waiting. In 2020, when Parabon built the genetic family tree from Fawn's DNA evidence, the branches led directly and unmistakably to Donald. Detectives obtained that stored blood sample and ran it against the evidence from Fawn's bedroom. 100% match. 31 years. The monster had been sitting at the family table the entire time. Even with Donald identified, questions remain that may never be answered. What about the 3 teenagers? The ones who confessed to the burglary, the ones whose stolen items were found scattered in the yard. Did Donald coordinate with them, knowing where everyone in the family would be? Did he hide upstairs while they looted the lower floor, waiting for his moment? Or did he come in separately while the boys had no idea what was happening above them? Police closed the case without additional charges, according to Felisa. And there was little point. There is no physical evidence connecting those boys to what Donald did. Only his DNA was found on Fawn. Maybe they never knew. Maybe they ran when they had what they came for, and he stayed behind in the dark. We will never know for certain. There is a second question that is darker still. In 1984, 5 years before Fawn's murder, a 20-year-old woman named Tracy Snow disappeared from the same neighborhood. She was Fawn's neighbor. She was never found. Donald Cox would have been 16 years old at the time. Could he have been responsible for Tracy Snow? How many other families are out there right now, still waiting for answers, with no idea that the person who took someone from them might already be connected to a solved case? Donald lived 17 years after killing Fawn, arrested repeatedly for theft and drug offenses, causing damage everywhere he went. Then his addiction killed him. Some call that karma. Others call it escape. Yet the Cox family was denied the closure that only a trial and conviction can bring, and no amount of time will ever fully close that wound. Fawn Marie Cox was 16 years old when she died. She was saving her tips to buy her first car. She roller skated with her sisters on weekends. She never missed church. She had a best friend across the street, a family that loved her completely, and a future she could almost reach. All of it was stolen from her on the night of July 25th, 1989, by someone who was supposed to be her family. Her parents and sisters spent 31 years refusing to let her name be forgotten. billboards along Kansas City roads, fundraisers that never stopped. Interview after interview, year after year, decade after decade, never once giving up. And eventually, the truth came. But it arrived wrapped in a pain no family should ever have to carry. Because the man who murdered Fawn was not an outsider. He ate at their table. He grieved at their daughter's funeral. He looked them in the eye for 31 years. Captain Ben Caldwell described the case simply and exactly. This one touched a lot of people because she was an innocent child who was murdered in her own bed. Fawn's story leaves us with 3 truths worth carrying. Evil does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table, mourning beside you at the funeral of the person it destroyed. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Even after 3 full decades, science found a way to give Fawn a voice. And families like the Coxes, who hold up billboards for decades and post on forums and never stop fighting, they are the real reason this case was ever solved. Justice does not pursue itself. It needs people willing to be relentless on its behalf. Fawn should be 51 years old today. She should have bought that car with her own tip money. She should have grown old alongside her sisters. Instead, she is forever 16. But she is not forgotten. Because of a family that refused to let her be. Because of science that finally caught up with the truth. And because people like you sat with her story today and gave it the attention it deserves. In 1989, Fawn left behind a silent witness, evidence that had no voice yet. In 2020, science finally gave that witness the chance to speak. The orange dumpster truck still appears in old photographs from that summer. It parked beneath the window that was always left unlocked. It was a symbol of trust, of family, of home, until it became a ladder for the worst kind of betrayal. Now, those symbols carry a different meaning. The truck is no longer just a killer's tool. It is a piece of a story that eventually led to the truth. The unlocked window is no longer just a vulnerability. It is a reminder that sometimes the danger does not come from outside. Sometimes it is already inside. Now I am going to say something directly to you before you click away. You just gave Fawn your full attention. You sat with her family's 31 years of pain. That matters. But there are dozens more stories waiting on this channel. Families just like the Coxes who spent years fighting to be heard. Victims who deserve the same attention you just gave Fawn tonight. Every single time you leave without subscribing, this channel loses the ability to bring those stories back to you. You found this video for a reason. The algorithm does not bring you to a story like this by accident. If you leave without subscribing and you never find your way back, every victim who comes after Fawn gets 1 fewer witness. I am not going to beg. But I will ask you to decide right now what kind of viewer you want to be. The kind who watches and disappears, or the kind who shows up for every story, for every family, for every victim who deserves to be heard. Subscribe to Crime Files America right now, before the next video starts and this moment passes. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is over there right now. Tell me what you think happened that night. Did those 3 teenagers know what Donald was doing upstairs while they stole? Do you think Tracy Snow's disappearance is connected? The comment section is yours. Like this video if Fawn's story moved you. Share it with one person who you think needs to hear it. Rest in peace, Fawn Marie Cox. A daughter, a sister, a friend. You deserve so much more than what was taken from you. But you are not forgotten. Not today. Not ever.